That's good. Oh, I didn't get. Um, Mr. Nagel, I presume.
Yeah, sort of.
Sort of? Oh, what's going on now?
Oh, well, I slept through the alarm this morning.
Ah, how nice.
I use my watch because with my hearing, I don't hear even the loudest alarm all the time.
Mhm.
So this vibrates on my wrist and always wakes me up. And when my wife woke me up, I looked at it and I had turned it off, and I have no recollection.
I've done that with my phone, which I use for my
Yeah.
alarm. Uh,
Yeah, I'm going through I have phases where I have low energy, sometimes really low energy for 2 or 3 days.
huh.
So it's sleeping. I don't know what that's about, but I've had it the condition for years.
Huh. That must have been difficult when you were working.
Um, I pushed. It didn't show up until very near the end.
Mm.
It may have something to do with the sleep apnea,
Mm-hmm.
um, but I monitor it, and it seems to be doing what it's supposed to be doing. But sometimes I just, you know, get semi-functional or non-functional. So I'm kind of functional, right?
Well, I'm glad you're kind of functional. Yeah, well, we, we're always up and down a bit.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna run upstairs if I
Sure.
may.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely.
One of the problems with waking up late.
Yes.
Morning.
Morning, Jeff. How are
How
you?
are you?
I'm good. Well, good as I could be.
Good. All right. Glad to hear that. Uh, I'm exceedingly busy.
You're what?
Exceedingly busy.
Why?
Our house goes on the market on Thursday,
Ah,
and lots and lots and lots of stuff to do to get there. I may have to leave early today. The photographer for the realtor is coming somewhere around 11.
ah,
So if it's a little early, I'm going to have to leave early.
yep.
So, but
That's
we're
the
getting there.
reality of it.
It is, yeah. So it's a very hectic time, but all
Oh,
things
yeah.
considered, okay.
Well, I hope all of that goes as smoothly as it can.
It's gone well so far, but you know, we haven't gotten to the real part where it's on the market and people are coming through here and we're getting offers or not getting offers or however it's going to go. And you know,
Yeah.
but at
I
least we're getting it as well in good a shape as we can and ready to go.
Yeah. Is how's the market down there? I mean, are houses
Oh,
selling?
yeah, it's good. It's still a seller's market. It's not as hot as it was maybe a year ago, but it's still, especially considering that interest rates are still not good. You know, they're
Yeah.
still very high. It's actually a good market.
Oh,
Um,
good.
so I'm expecting it to go well. I'm expecting interest in the house, especially our price range is a good market. You know, we're middle, we're not expensive, we're not dirt cheap,
Yeah.
but our price range is good. So
Good.
yeah, we got a really good realtor as well. So I'm comfortable with all that.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Bill's returning to us here.
Yeah, I heard some thumping of some sort.
Just coming down our stairs.
Morning, Jeff.
Hi, Bill. How are
Okay.
So, well, since you may have to go early, we should get started.
Shaw really has energy.
It has energy today. It does indeed.
you?
Questions?
Um, Regarding the sheet that you sent us, I've read
Yes.
it once. I haven't gone into it again and again yet. And maybe when I do, it will click a little bit better. But could you just talk a little bit more about where it is discussing lengthening, starting with the fingertips, going to the wrist and hand and back, then going to the elbow and back, then going to the
Hmm.
scapula and back, and all throughout the body, how and what that is doing?
Hopefully, it's lengthening.
Hopefully, yes.
um, you're actually feeling the energy move as you lengthen. So that's was Bruce's purpose in breaking that particular exercise down, um, with the sense that first you just focus on um, the the energy going from the wrist to the fingertips, and from the fingertips back to the wrist, and what you're looking for, that particular exercise, I realized I actually should have talked to you guys before I sent that, because that standing practice, not the 8 gates, but the standing practice he's talking about there, actually walking practice, is really focused on lengthening in the form, or wherever, but it is indeed a practice that's related to that. And so you're working on finding how, when you allow that elbow to to release and you can lengthen, that the energy goes out to your fingertips, and when it springs back, it comes back. I It may be further than the wrist for you at the beginning. It depends where you are. Um, he broke that down so that it was aimed for whoever. But maybe you can do fingertips to elbow, or fingertips to shoulder, or even fingertips to scapula or spine, whatever you can feel. But then you want to continue that practice and get that lengthening to go throughout the entire body. And an indication that the lengthening is working is the movement of the energy and the release of the nerves. Um,
Related question. When we are lengthening as part of our, whether it's 8 gates or our form, where are we originating from? Because I don't originate from my fingertips. I was like envisioning the scapula as the at where we are now as our starting point.
Um, Generally speaking, lengthening is easier to do if you lengthen out first.
Right.
So yes, that's true. Now he has written that I realize on with a sense of lengthening in first, which is more difficult to do because um, you can feel the lengthening out much more easily than you can feel the lengthening in. Although once you really get the lengthening out, the natural lengthening in is, as he says, it is a springing back. It is not a, a pulling back.
Right.
Um, so, indeed, uh, that's another reason why, really, before beginning, um, whether it's 8 gates or the form, that if you can begin to work on um, lengthening, in this case, um, and eventually opening and closing, but and of course lengthening is related to opening and closing. But um, if you can begin to lengthen before you start to move, then when you go into the first movement, which um, uh, in many cases it is in, you have some place to go in from because you've already established that rhythm.
So when you do initiate the form, the 8 gates, whatever you're going to do, and you lengthen out initially, does it originate at this point for us from our scapula, from our elbow? What are we? How are we doing? Beginning the lengthening.
Wherever you can. Um, I would say ideally to begin with would be good from the spine to
Uh,
work towards that
uh,
because then that really makes it easier to continue down through the torso and the legs.
uh,
Because eventually you want the sense that your whole body is lengthening,
right. And
not just,
that's what that fingertips exercise is trying to get us to do, right?
yep,
Okay.
yep, absolutely.
All right.
But it's much easier to feel in the arms because we
Right.
focus ourselves so strongly on our arms. It's easier to feel in our arms because, for one thing, you're not standing on your arms.
Right.
If you walked on your hands instead of your feet, your legs would probably be easier to lengthen. But
Mm.
I don't think any of us are about to do that.
Right.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Bill used to do that.
Oh.
um, Actually, just a side note, when I was in China, the first morning I was out and seeing all these people exercising in many different ways, I actually did see somebody who was walking on their hands quite a distance, uh, as well as some people walking backwards, not forwards,
Oh.
which is another practice definitely done by numbers of people in China.
Hmm.
Uh, so saying that is not perhaps as quite as strange as it might sound. Does that answer your question?
It's helpful. Yep. Yeah, it's helpful. It's all still new. Trying to integrate it into my thinking, into my form relaxation, but just needing to kind of understand the physical mechanics of where I'm envisioning. I know it comes from mind intent before anything, but envisioning where that will begin or where it's best to begin at this point, all that,
Yeah.
just some of the specifics. And so,
So um, one thing I say is that, uh, and I think your description is good, the Bruce's fingertips exercise. One thing is that should be walking
okay,
because it's really related eventually to the fact that you're lengthening continuously in the form. The nice thing about doing it walking is that you can set up a rhythm of one step is lengthening out, the next step is lengthening in, and but that particular practice, wherever you hold your arms, and you could hold them anywhere, um, you want the arms bent to some degree, and the hands stay fixed in place. So um, your hands don't move in that exercise. The elbow drops, and the hands stay where they are, whether you're lengthening out or lengthening in. And um, I get an instant pumping of energy out to my fingertips. Um, but you're trying, you're starting by, the idea is that as you do that, that you're feeling the energy moving out, let's say wrist to fingertips and back, and then from elbow to fingertips and back, and shoulder to finger, but the movement is the same. You're
so
not,
you're saying that the elbow, when you're doing that, the arm is stationary, the elbow's not stretching out and lengthening.
no,
It's just holding stationary, basically.
the
Physically.
hands remain stationary,
Okay.
whatever position you're in. The
Right.
hands remain stationary. It's the release through the whole body eventually that drops the elbows, and then they spring back. And basically, so the that obviously is not what happens when we get into actually doing the form or in doing the eight gates. If you're doing the eight gates pulsing movement. Um, so it is simply an exercise to train the lengthening, not how you should be doing the form or anything else.
Okay.
A lot of that I probably should have said to you last time before I sent that to
Yeah,
you,
well,
but
it was good to have read through that and then have the questions anyways,
yeah,
so that was good.
good. Do you have any?
Uh, I want to say that uh, more and more. Now, I have a long way to go with Qigong, whether it's gods or
Yeah.
eight gates or whatever, but I can feel things coming together,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes energy flowing all over the place. Um, I don't, I can't get that going, that feeling in the form, and
Mm.
it's frustrating, you know. So I mean, the more adept I get at the Qigong, the more the form frustrates me because it's not going on there. Yeah,
So the form is much more difficult, obviously,
yeah,
for a number of reasons. For one, you're going constantly changing the movement you're doing. You're
yeah.
doing something different every instant. And the pace of what you're doing changes constantly. So Whereas when you go go out to Pung, you've got plenty of time to lengthen out.
Mm.
But when you go to G, you have lengthen in and lengthen out.
In just
Bam, bam.
bam, yeah.
And this is another reason for practicing extremely slowly in order to give yourself time to experience it.
Okay.
And sometimes in order to work on that, you just would do, a small part of the form, not try to do the whole thing. If you're going to move at
Snail's pace, yeah.
yeah, right, then you have to slow it down to where you can feel it, where you have a chance of doing that. And I'm saying that from experience because I have exactly the same reaction. How on earth are you going to lengthen and feel all that lengthening if you're moving at one of our normal paces of doing the form? Which is another reason why Master Joe talked about, and many other teachers also, this is not his alone, but you work at both extremes. You work at slowing the form down as much as you possibly can without losing anything. You also speed it up as fast as you can go without losing anything. And gradually that
I should be
range
good at that.
range expands. But what happens for most of us is that we sort of get stuck at doing everything at one pace.
Yeah.
And so every once in a while you have to say to yourself, wait a minute, I need to do this a little differently today in order to feel what's going on.
Okay.
But that's believe me, I completely understand. That's not.
I'm just. Part of me feels that I've been at it long enough that it should be happening, and why isn't it? So.
Forget that.
Yeah.
It's much easier when you go into the 8 gates where you have a rhythm.
Yeah, and your attention is really fairly limited, as opposed to the form where
Yeah.
all kinds of things are going on.
Yeah. Well, the same things are going on in the 8 gates, but you're repeating movement.
Yeah.
And and I think it may have been my note, not Bruce's, but anyway, one of the things in doing the 8 gates is from time to time to do the full 8 gates practice, which is to do each posture 8 times, 8 breaths. This gives you more time to really focus on what you're doing. I have reduced that to just doing 3 of each one in order not to spend as long in class on that, but doesn't mean that it's supposed to be done with 8 breaths in each one, which actually isn't all that long.
No.
When you.
Yeah.
So, other questions?
It wasn't even a question.
No.
I mean, it was,
Or.
But I appreciate
thoughts?
the advice to slow it down in particular.
Yeah.
Uh,
The other way to do it, to play with it, is to literally pause at the end of each lengthening in and lengthening out, and make sure that you feel it happening.
Yeah.
And not worry about pace or.
Mm.
And if you do that, that's another way to really give yourself time to feel it. Another way to do it. Um, Again, probably not trying to do the whole form, but pick a part and work on one part of it for a little bit that way. So, well, we ought to do the 8 gates to get started.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
and thinking about lengthening in this. Good, David. So stepping out and letting yourself first just settle into that position. Relax the qua. Feel your connection to the earth and to the heavens. Allow yourself to feel that support, the support of that connection. And then beginning to think about lengthening and feeling a sense of lengthening out and lengthening in. And focusing on the elbow is a good way to do that here. Just letting that elbow release. And it will naturally spring back. You don't have to contract the muscles to do that. And then you want to begin your movement from a lengthening out and then beginning to lengthen in and lengthen out and lengthen in and lengthen out. And the pulsing just continues that. And as you begin to really allow that lengthening to happen, you begin to understand why this is called pulsing. Because the energy begins to pulse. Lengthening in, lengthening out. Another reason why it's important to really understand the midpoints of the movements, both the transitions and the pulsing, so that as far as this exercise is concerned, you split the in and out into equal parts. lengthening in, lengthening out. Lengthening in halfway, lengthening out the other half. Release. This particular practice allows you to work on lengthening in 8 different positions. Lengthening in, releasing out. Lengthening in, lengthening out. In and out. Lengthening in, lengthening out. Lengthening in and out. Good. Questions? So one of the things which actually Bill probably has a little advantage here because of his work with gods is that perhaps a little more aware of the importance of being aware of those transition points and making them as smooth and even as possible without any break. So it's really important that it's not in, out, in, out. You know that already, but beginning to feel those transitions and being able to make them smoothly flow from one to the other is really an important part of everything we're doing. So, did you have any questions, Jeff?
No, not right now.
Okay. Um, so let's do a little bit of the stopping and feeling exercise with the form, just to play with that a little. Okay.
That would be good.
But I can. Eyes and ears. I don't know about yours, but mine used to be better. So just start with standing for a moment and beginning with allowing yourself to lengthen out and lengthen in. And this time as you lengthen out, pause and just relax. Allow that lengthening out to just release as much as possible. And then lengthening in and pause for a moment. Feel it springing back in. And then we're going to lengthen out and begin to move. So lengthen out and then lengthen in and then lengthen out. And pause. Feel the elbows release. Feel it release as far down your body as possible. And then lengthen in and pause. And feel that coming in. Ideally coming in the inside of the arms. And then lengthen out and pause and feel the release out. And then lengthen in, pause, and then in a little more and pause. And then lengthen out. Feel that expansion into on. And then lengthen in, turning. And pause. Feel the end. And then out to pump. Pause. Release. Feel that opening through the body. And then lengthen in. And feel that. And then lengthen out. Feel the out. Feel the releasing. And lengthen in. And then in a little more. And then lengthen out. And then lengthen in. Pause. Then continue in and pause. Lengthening in. Then lengthening out. Pause. Feel that release out. Then lengthen in, reset. And then lengthen out. So just pause. Did that help?
It was quite instructive.
Oh.
Certainly more trouble releasing out because what I'm assuming is that I'm tensing up in anticipation of the next movement.
Uh-huh.
And so, the times that it did work, interestingly enough, I'm still feeling it in my legs,
Good.
tingling,
Uh-huh.
so that's actually how I identified
Sure. Yeah.
that it had let go,
Good. Great. Jeff?
I think that what we just did was extremely helpful, and if we can do more of it, whether today or in the future, that would be good. In this particular instance, when we did it, I felt, and in particular on single whip, when we were over on the side, uh, lengthened out like this, and then also when we lengthened out like this, I felt it more than I have in the past, both of those two positions in particular.
Uh-huh. Good.
So yeah, I think this was very helpful. And it's just obviously one of these things that's going to take a lot of practice to gain sensitivity to what's going on.
Thank you. I didn't have to say that.
Oh, after 2.5 decades, it finally sank in, David.
Well, it takes us all a while.
Yeah,
um,
but I'm still not feeling it in my legs. So we'll throw that in there too.
well, um, that can take a while, and one thing I would say is when Bill is again probably got an advantage on you in a way because
All right.
in God's we have been working on center to periphery energy movement, which means working from the dantian to the crown of the head, the fingertips and the toes, and back to the dantian.
Uh,
So that's another way to think about the energy. Is that it is when you're coming in that it's all coming in to your center, and when you're going out, it's all going out. Rather than rather than focusing on the um, up and down flows through the entire body, which are also going on at the same time. It's not that they aren't present; they're certainly present, but particularly as we work on, um, certainly in the form, our focus is on the center to periphery movement of the energy, um, not just the earth to heaven to earth circuit.
right.
I do have a question of sorts. As between the lower dantian and the qua, I find myself going back and forth, when we're doing anything about what's driving the works. um, is there a better or a worse way to think about it?
Well, they're both.
Yeah, I mean, I know they're both involved.
Yeah. Is there a? Um, I think that it depends on what stage you're working on. There are times when certainly, when you're working on getting all the movements to coordinate together, then focusing on the qua is probably going to be better.
Better, okay.
But when you're focusing on the energy movement in the body, then it has to be the dantian.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they're both important. They're both both active.
Yeah.
I mean, then you go back to the 6 external correspondences um, that you're trying very hard to get the feet and hands to work together, and the elbows and the knees to work together, and the shoulders, scapula, and qua to work together. So that's another whole
Forgot about that.
another whole piece
Yeah.
that um, you don't want to emphasize one half of one of those correspondences over the other, is you want them to be equal. And that's difficult with our attention on the arms. We get so focused up here that what's happening down below gets lost or isn't important, but it is very important. And so um, finding how you get um, the elbows and knees to move at the same time and in proportion to each other, it's going to be an interesting focus. Or shoulders and qua.
Yeah.
So in other words, no part is still. On the other hand, when you get into that, I do like coming back to Master Joe's definition of movement as holding, folding, and gearing, which have you been involved in that discussion? I know Jeff has.
Yeah.
Well, simply that there are three ways to define the movement. In other words, um, an, an arm could be held but moved.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and obviously it can fold, and it can fold in the other direction.
Yeah.
So that's a fold. But gearing, same thing. You can have gearing and folding working together, and obviously we have that a lot. You can have gearing and holding working together, and obviously the gearing can go in the opposite direction. So it's just another way to define all of that, and sometimes that's a help when you begin to look at things in a little more detail, to have that way of looking at it. Obviously, most of the time there is gearing, and a lot of the time there is also folding with it.
Yeah.
Or sometimes holding. The thing that gets really confusing is that's really talking about external movement. When you begin to talk about internal movement, so that's when we're talking about twisting and spiraling. And obviously with twisting, it's very easy if we combine it with gearing. Now we can say, oh yeah, it's twisting out and it's twisting in, but I can also twist out and twist in and have no movement. So the internal movements aren't necessarily visible. Blah blah blah. Guess you know all of that, but just throw it out since we're talking about this. So what would be most helpful for you guys at the moment?
You mean today?
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't mind continuing on with what we were just doing. from single whip moving forward. I found that to be very helpful.
Okay.
That's fair enough, yeah.
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 All right. Good. Let's do it then.
Yeah.
So if we're at single whip, we're twisting out. And then as we shift and rotate, we're twisting in and really feel that twisting in as you make that touch forward. And then as you step back, you should pause again because that's really still twisting in, even though the arm changes its direction of rotation. And then twisting out, lengthening out. And remember that the hands stay centered in front of the body. We have a tendency to swing the arms over to the side. But really they just go, they're still centered in front of the body. And they lengthen out. And then with that release and rotation, they're lengthening in, pause, and then lengthening out. Feel that release. And then lengthening in, step, and lengthening out, release that out, then lengthening in, and then out. Let it go. And then lengthening in, pause, feel it coming in, and in a little bit further, and out. And then in, pause, and then out. And lengthening in, pause, lengthening out. release, pause. Lengthening in, pause, lengthening out, lengthening in, lengthening out. Lengthening in, lengthening out. Lengthening in, lengthening out. Lengthening in, lengthening out. Lengthening in, pause, lengthening out, lengthening in, lengthening out. Lengthening in, lengthening out. Lengthening in, lengthening out. Lengthening in, lengthening out. Lengthening in, and out. Lengthening in, and lengthening out. lengthening in, lengthening out. Lengthening in, all the way around. Lengthening out in, lengthening out. Lengthening in, lengthening out. Lengthening in, lengthening out. Lengthening in. Lengthening out. Lengthening in, lengthening out. Lengthening in, lengthening out. Lengthening in, out. 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 In, in, out. In. Out. In. Out. Yes. Questions? Comments?
Well, there were two places in particular where in the shoulder strike and subdue the tiger where I was going the wrong way. Yeah, shoulder I was somehow coming in instead of out, and likewise. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing throughout, we've talked about my moving back, and I think I discovered one of the reasons why is that at every pause, I found myself bent forward.
Ah. Yep.
And had to stand up straight.
Uh-huh. Cool. Well, good information.
Yes.
Jeff?
I've got some questions. I'm not going to ask them now because I have to go, but related to the transition point. Now that we're thinking more about that, some of the transition points, there was probably at least 3 or 4 were not quite where I thought they were. And I'm going to try during the week to go back to this video and I can write them down at that point.
Okay.
I'm going to try. But just my point being that we mentioned focusing more and making smoother transition points, and that raised some questions from that flow. So I'll get back to you on it.
Okay.
But I do have to go, so.
Okay, good luck with your
yes, thank you.
pictures and
Great.
selling and etc.
Hopefully next week I'll have some good news.
I hope so. I hope so.
All right, take care. Have a good week. Bill, have a great week. We'll
Yep,
see you guys
you
next
too.
week. Take
You
care.
too. Take.
Bye.
Well, I think his photographer is.
Yeah.
So. And any other questions you'd like to raise at the moment?
I'll save one for next week. It's releasing the spine. I can feel what's going on in the arms, the shoulder scapula, the legs. When I do the spine stretch, I am increasingly aware of the release. But I'm not in the midst of something else, feeling what, yeah.
So that's really the C curve. Bend the bow and shoot the arrow. And so that's a continual bending from the center to both ends, so that it's different from the spine stretch.
Yeah.
But this is what we've talked about in Gods too, where we're trying to be aware not only of the vertebra releasing and separating, but those anterior and posterior ligaments moving. And it is harder to feel than other places in the body immediately. So I think that's a matter of practice. You know, there's not I can't.
Yeah, I mean, it's simply trailing behind, you know.
You're not trailing behind, you're just working through. You're doing just fine.
Yeah. It's not necessarily a reason to congratulate myself, but I am noticing more what's going on and why, and
I have heard that increasingly from you over, time.
Mm.
So that's good. That's progress.
Yep.
And that's how it is most of the time. It's just a little bit here and a little bit there. The big ahas and breakthroughs don't come very often, but once in a while.
Yeah. Okay.
But you're doing well.
Well, I mean, I know, I mean, there have been times where I haven't been moving forward very much, but I feel like there is some movement now, so.
Good. Great.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's my pleasure.
We'll go fight the bridge was interesting. I sat there and I was on the verge of texting you and saying, I'm going back home, this is ridiculous, because nothing was going either way.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the zip line going across, and the bridge was open both ways. There was nothing on the bridge, so I don't know what the holdup had been, but it had barriers, and one way and the lights, and there was nothing, But
next
we'll
week.
see what they have up their sleeve on my trip back.
Yeah. Next week it'll be closed.
Oh, I haven't looked that far ahead.
They're doing a 3 or 4 day closure. Won't be opening until Wednesday at 11.
I'm sorry?
Won't open until Wednesday at 11.
Oh, okay.
So.
Okay, well, Zoom.
Thank God for Zoom.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you get some energy.
Thank you. It'll come.
Good.
See you tomorrow morning.
Yep, good.